Hi, welcome back to another TerranScapes video. In this video, I wanted to go over some recent experiments I've been working on with snow. The basic premise, I have a customer who has a request for a large, for a board set, modular board set, but to be covered in a very frozen waste, sort of glacial look. And he sent me some photos of the kind of surface that he's looking for, and I'll show you a few of those right here. So looking at those, you can see that heavy snow drifts, stark ice, stark rocks. So we're looking for something a little different than what I've done in the past. So what I've been doing is I've been doing a series of snow experiments to try to think about how to cover large areas like that in that kind of a deep snow look. And I thought I'd go over some of the experiments here and show you some of the things I've discovered and talk about where this might go in the future, and then I can run that by the customer. So the very first thing I wanted to try is, because this is going to involve so much material, I wanted to see about cutting a little bit of cost and also altering the texture a little bit. So first thing I did is I went in and I tried the traditional baking soda, white glue, white paint, and a little bit of water. And the first one I mixed up was a little bit too stiff. I could barely smooth it out. And then I did a second round and pushed it around. And I'm mostly thinking initially here, I'm concerned about the edges because I want the boards to meet up with a relatively good clean seam that doesn't have a lot of undulations. So I smoothed it out a little bit there. And once I did this, I looked at it and I really don't like this texture. It's a little bit too smooth, almost creamy, not quite the look that I want for my snow. I wanted a little more texture in it, but basically something spreadable like this so I could produce some topography in the snow. As looking at those photos, right, we want some undulations, some kind of wind action, something on the snow to break it up so it doesn't just look like I painted the boards white, which is what I could do, and I mean, we're hoping to achieve a little more realism than that. So then I went in and I mixed it with 50-50 soft flake snow and baking soda. And I pushed it around a bit. And then I noticed this yellowing picking up here. I did a second one because I thought maybe I was picking up something from, this is a piece of scrap hardboard, and I had a line drawn on it, and I thought maybe that had wicked into the snow. And I did another one, and still I picked up some yellow. But I was encouraged as, let's see if I can get it real close here. 2 inches, there we go. Notice how that has some really nice texture to it. That's the kind of texture I was looking for. But was really curious about the staining, so tried another one. Here I primed it with white latex primer. I did 2 thin coats. Oh no, I'm sorry, this wasn't latex primer. This was just an acrylic Liquitex Basics white. And I did 2 thin coats, and still, look at all this bleeding. And then I realized I must be picking up something from the wood of the hardboard, and that's probably bleeding into it. So I set that aside, and oh, and before I leave this aside, what I did is here I tried to make a thicker consistency. I tried to change the consistencies in terms of how much I could push it around and produce surface details. None of these are really quite ideal for what I'm looking for, but it's sort of playing around with it. And then on this one, on the bottom half, I sprinkled excuse me, some soft flake snow on top of it before it dried. Now, I don't know if it produces that much of a texture difference. So here's unsprinkled and here's sprinkled, but I think it does add just a little bit, cat hair, a little bit of texture to it. So this is something I wanted to expand upon. Set that aside. So here, I said, well, the heck with the hardboard. So I decided to go with a piece of scrap white styrene. Then I know I'm working from a clean foundation. And I did this and pushed it around and mixed it up, and really, really liked that. This is ultimately what I would love to have, I think, for the overall surface. So I felt like I was really onto something. One thing I noticed, however, when I went back and I was rubbing these to determine its durability, I noticed it was getting dirty really easily. And here you can see with the baking soda, look at that, real quick, And I was like, oh God, that's the one thing you don't want, is a bunch of snow getting dirty from gamers' hands all over it. Turns out, once I sprayed it with a matte clear coat, I'm using Rust-Oleum's matte clear just because it's cheap and easy. That gave it a really nice finish that seems to avoid picking up dirt as easily. So I decided, okay, solve the dirt problem, solve the texture problem, solve the yellow problem. Let's move on to a full-size board and see what happens. Alright, so here's a full-size board. Now, this is my first attempt. I took a 10 by 10 board. I primed it with latex white primer. I only did one coat on the sides, just because I don't know, it's just, I don't really need the sides for it, but I just wanted to give them a coat so when I put them up against each other, if there was a little gap, I'd at least get some of that white coming through so I could judge the gaps. But I gave 2 coats to the top, and then applied a fairly thick layer. Now, this is where, and boy, getting contrast in this video is going to be kind of important for seeing what's going on. So I'm going to keep changing the angles. I spent actually a lot of time trying to push this around into piles, and also getting an even coverage, not having brush strokes or really spatula strokes from the spreading it come into it, and getting a thin edge along so that there wouldn't be all these big undulations. And the consistency that I'm working with is something kind of akin to, you ever take cornstarch? All right, here we go. Ooh, the hand is talking. You ever take cornstarch and add water to it, and it acts like a solid when you squeeze it, and then when you let it go, it liquefies and pours through your hands? There's plenty of videos of this on YouTube. It's an old science experiment for, middle school science. And it's just, it's a property of liquefaction, like when things are vibrated. This happens in earthquake zones as well, when there's a lot of water in the ground. When you vibrate it, the water comes to the surface and the material settles, but under force, under pressure, it'll act like a solid and it will stay relatively rigid. Well, this material's kind of acting like that. So I had a really hard time spreading it out and maintaining ridges in it. And didn't really like the topography of this, but at least it gave me a sense of the overall coating of a board. Still following me? So then what I did is I went in on this board and I spatulaed it really quick. I said, the heck, I spent probably like 20 minutes fiddling, because it's a learning experience, and I'm pushing it around and trying to make little divots and, get dimples in it and add some texture, and, I said, well, obviously that's not working. So here I just went scoop, 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 push it around, make a blob, wipe up some of the edge, throw it back on top, tap, tap, and let it go. And this produced better topography than the other one, but has some, some irregularities, and it wasn't exactly what I'm looking for, but I felt like I was getting closer. And we're going to come back to these 2 boards in just a second. But I decided as a final experiment that rather than trying to push this material around to make the topography, that I should go to Woodland Scenics. They produce a product called Flex Paste. If you ever take a look at their snow video where they show different kinds of winter techniques for terrain, for railroad modelers, they use Flex Paste quite heavily. This is kind of like an acrylic white gel, but it's not translucent. It stays opaque. and it dries relatively quickly and doesn't shrink very aggressively. It's actually kind of a nice product, and they use this for bulking up their areas and then applying snow to it. So what I did here is I actually just threw down very quickly a few mounds of flex paste, not too high, not too big. I just, again, real quick experiment just to see, threw those down. And I didn't even prime this board. I just left this pink. I was like, you know, I'm really looking for texture here. And then when I added the snow to this, I kept finding that it was had a very thick edge at the leading edge here. So I just kept tapping it and tapping it and tapping it and wondered if it would actually pull off of these mounds. What I discovered is that it has made a fantastic, very even coating, including over my tiny little mounds. And look at that. Clings to the edge, slumped down, and just gives, most importantly, a very nice uniform thickness at the edge, relatively uniform. A little care and I could probably control that a little bit better, and during application I could just, you know, scrape this off, put it back into my bucket, and then at the end go back and sand this down to a nice smooth edge. So I feel more encouraged at this point, and for texture, okay, now we'll see if this will show up. What I did is the soft flake snow sprinkle on top of it at the end, and this has been initially mixed to that very almost just past a putty consistency. It's Woodland Scenic soft flake snow, baking soda, white glue, a little bit of white paint to keep the baking soda from yellowing, and a little bit of water. And this produced, and then sprinkled with a little soft flake snow, and I really like the texture on this now. Oh, there we go. All right. I'm sure other shots are going to show well, but this one I think just captures it. So that has given me quite a bit of encouragement to finally move forward with this project a little bit. One of the thoughts on these kinds of mounds, though, however, is frequently, and in the pictures, if you go back and you take a look at those, you probably will notice, you know, they have a sort of arrangement, like as the wind blows across the surface, you're going to end up with basically dunes, right? Ridges of the snow piling up and cascading over the edges. I have to really avoid that, however, as when boards are going to be used, and we'll come back to these now, when these boards are going to be used, you know, they're going to have different configurations that they might end up in. So if I have it in a wind-blown direction, it's not going to match with another one, and it's going to look jarring if they're coming in at an angle or, you know, whatever, doing something weird. So I'm going to be going for something a bit more irregular and more like rounded dunes, and in some places build them up higher than this. As I said, this is just an experiment. But one of the things that I take away from that also is that should I have a slope, so I want to do new rocky outcroppings for these where the land will be lifted with a rocky edge. This will flow on that surface really well, and potentially over the overhang, and, you know, drip a little. I think I'm going to be able to get some really good effects out of this kind of an application, so pretty interested in that. As a last thought, I feel like I'm going over a lot, but this is, you know, been about a week of off and on experimenting. My concern was with the seams and how those are going to look on a snowboard. Now, one of the things I struggle with in general, though, is that the foam is not manufactured the same thickness. Look at that. That's got a really big difference on this board, actually. This one's really quite a bit thicker than normal, so you can see it's producing an unsightly edge there. Now, normally when I send out the modular board sets, I send a series of shims, little strips of foam cut in various thicknesses that you can just put under some of the low boards to lift them up. So I'm going to artificially do that here in our looky-loo today and hold them at their level. But that gives you an idea of what the seam will look like. Now, the thing that bothers me the most about it, and this is really going to come down to the customer's, ability to accept it or not. This one's actually, I did these pretty quickly just to see, but you can see there, is that the seam is going to necessarily be dark. Even painting the sides white, because it's a shadow, you get a little bit of a dark line visually on the boards when you're looking at them laid out on the table. And I don't really have any way, I don't think there's any way that you can correct that. So that's something to consider going forward before I work on the full set of boards, is whether that's going to be acceptable or not. You know me, you know me by now. I'm over analytical and overly worried, and it is a modular set, so these are sort of the inevitabilities. But because it's snow and it's a little bit different, that's an optimum join right there, and you can see what that might look like. So that's something to consider. So, while I could have just cut to the end and showed you, basically kind of where I'm at with the project and how I think I might like to go forward, I wanted to share some of the experiments leading up to it to give you a sense of at least how I go through problem-solving things when they're especially, fairly new techniques. I've always said that snow and ice and whatnot are probably the second most difficult terrain-making technique, second only to moving water, really. And, I feel like I really wanted to take this project on so that I could challenge myself and kind of get snow under my belt a little bit better. So, I'm going to be assuming that the customer likes what he sees, and we're going to keep going forward on this project. It is a full modular board set. It's going to have crevasses in it. It's going to have rocky outcroppings. It's going to have exposed frozen lakes. So it's going to have a lot of different kinds of elements on it. But before any of those elements can get done, the basic concept of how to get the snow on the boards in a way that doesn't make me crazy or take forever to do was the first key. And so I feel like I've got that down now, and I'm pretty excited to start in on this project. I got to clear some shelf space first before I do that, so it'll probably be a week before I really get underway on it. But it will be coming up soon, assuming customer approval. So, of course, feel free to put questions or comments down below. Always happy to try to address those as best as I can. I might curtail responding to every single comment coming up in the future as they're starting to grow in volume, which is flattering. And but any questions for sure, I always make an effort to respond to, as I try to help share with the community as much as I can. So thanks for watching. Keep your eye on the channel. I will be back soon with another video.